Elwyn Berlekamp graduated at the age of 24 with a PhD from MIT and has spent most of his career at Berkeley since then. His PhD was in electrical engineering, and his appointment at Berkeley was in electrical engineering. He has spent some time at Bell Labs and elsewhere in the meantime, but mostly at Berkeley. He's the only professor of mathematics who doesn't hold a mathematics degree here. So anybody who knows anything about the culture of our math department knows that that's quite a tall statement. He is an expert on a number of things, as you might imagine from his varied career. He is, let's see, in his research, his earlier research, he devised algorithms for decoding algebraic error-correcting codes. And they've had widespread use in disk memories and magnetic and optical memory, as well as DVDs. And they're the NASA standards for space communications. His first graduate student invented the Unix operating system in the late 1960s. Elwyn helped found several, he went part-time as a faculty member, helped found several companies, one of which is worth now more than 1,000 times what he sold it for. He was elected to the National Academy of Engineering at the age of 37, the youngest member in 1977, elected to the National Academy of Sciences, highly unusual to be elected to both. He was elected to NAS in 1999. He's also a member of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. He's co-authored or authored several books largely on game theory, which is what he's going to be speaking to us about today. One that I've shared with my son and daughter is called The Dots and Boxes Game, Sophisticated Child's Play. And another well-known set of volumes called Winning Ways for Your Mathematical Plays, which you can get on Amazon as well if you want. I believe that Elwyn is going to speak today on the Chinese game of Go. Is that correct? And I will leave it to him for the rest. Thank you.
Much as I would like to lecture at a large blackboard, which is my normal style, in order to reach out to varied audiences here today, I've decided to copy some of my predecessors. So I'm going to use both a written script, which I don't think I've ever done before, and a PowerPoint presentation, which I've done only once or twice. So hopefully it all works, but this is a test. This is the website of the College of Letters and Sciences today. As you know, we have many departments organized into 4 divisions. We are also the heirs of a long tradition dating back to medieval Europe, when the 2 subjects now known as mathematics were then arithmetic and geometry. They were viewed as static subjects. The dynamic form of geometry was also included. It was called astronomy. The dynamic form of arithmetic, which was then mostly the study of number theory, included chords, which formed the basis of music. Together, these subjects formed the quadrivium, which were the origin of our quantitative scholastic aptitude test. The 3 verbal subjects were called the trivium, and these so-called trivial subjects comprised the LNS curriculum in medieval Europe. Meanwhile, in Asia, beginning with the Tang dynasty starting in 618 AD, and for many centuries thereafter, the emperors of China reserved many positions for gentlemen scholars, who were distinguished by their mastery of the 4 accomplishments. The first 2 of these formed the basis of the Asian LNS writing requirement. They were poetry and painting. Painting included calligraphy, so it really was a verbal art. The 3rd of the 4 accomplishments was music. The 4th of the 4 accomplishments was mastery of the Asian board game called Go. So if we were to be true to our global intellectual heritage, you can see that 3/7 of the resources of the College of Letters and Sciences today ought to be devoted to studies of the game of Go. Which brings me to the topic of today's talk, mathematical Go. This is a modern attempt to bridge these traditions of the East and the West. This is the only Go book translated from English into Japanese, contrasted with several hundred that have been translated in the other direction. Our work on this book has led to many interesting interactions with East Asians and their attitudes towards theory, rules, ties, clocks, team matches, and tournament organization are still all very different from those in the West. Go is a board game with very simple basic rules, yet very sophisticated strategy. I'll first comment on a few bits of the historical background, moving quickly to the most recent century, which I think is the most relevant today. The game of Go originated in China about 4,000 years ago. Confucius regarded it as a frivolous pastime. But first the Taoists, then also the Buddhists, the court, and eventually large swaths of the entire populations of China, Korea, and then Japan came to regard Go as the ultimate intellectual challenge. This attitude has persisted into modern times. The parents of a promising adolescent would often pay a famous Go master to accept the student as a boarder in the master's house, where he would study under the master's tutelage. This apprentice system has also continued into the present day. Following the Meiji Restoration in mid-19th century Japan, a variety of championship titles were established, often funded by rival business groups. Today, there are about a dozen major titles, each of which has a first prize of at least 25 million yen, or about $250,000. In the early 1930s, several radically new opening strategies were introduced by two young superstars, Kitani and Go Sagan. The younger Go master was actually born in China, where he astounded his elders playing brilliant Go at the age of 11. His playing career in Japan in the 1930s was marked by some spectacular victories, interspersed with many illnesses and a few defeats. Today, most professional games last one day. The slowest and most famous Go game ever played, by far, occurred in the fall of 1938. It involved some colorful characters. One player, named Sushai, held two major titles, and he had announced that this game would mark his retirement. His challenger was Kitani. The official commentator was Go Sagan. The sponsor was Japan's largest newspaper, the Asahi Shimbun. To boost their circulation, they arranged for this game to be played slowly over many sessions, each in a different city on a different day with many breaks. The actual game took 15 sessions spread out over several months. The winner was Kitani. The newspaper columns about this game discussed not only the plays on the board, but also the manners, the emotions, and the symbolism of youth versus age. The writer of these newspaper columns was Kawabata Yasunari. He later revised them into a very famous book called The Master of Go. He won the 1968 Nobel Prize for Literature. Following a series of more illnesses and personal crises, Go Sagan spent the years during World War II becoming a devoutly religious Buddhist. But after the war, he returned to dominate the game for an entire decade. For several consecutive years, he held all of the major titles, a feat well beyond what anyone else has ever done before or since. Sushai died 14 months after his famous retirement match. Kawabata died 4 years after receiving his Nobel Prize. Kitani died in 1975. But Go Sagan continued to find innovative new openings and to teach students well into his late 80s. This photo was taken on his 90th birthday in 2004. One of his own students, a woman named Naiwei Rui, won a major international title in 2002, more than 50 years after Go Sagan had first held them all himself. During the reign of the Gang of Four in China, Go masters, like university professors, were sent to labor in the fields. But across the straits in Taiwan, the Ing Foundation funded an international competition for children up to the age of 12, another for students up to the age of 18, and another international competition among computer programs. Ing also funded a $1 million prize for the first time the winner of their computer title is able to beat the winner of their kids' title. That prize has remained unclaimed for nearly 20 years, and I do not expect it to be claimed in my lifetime. After the death of Chairman Mao, Chinese Go recovered rapidly. In 1985, a Chinese team led by Zhuzhou Jiang defeated Japan in an international match. In the past 5 years, Seoul, Korea has emerged as the world's foremost center of professional Go. Today, there are over 1,500 players of professional rank. Here is where they are. Outside of East Asia, most of the world does not play Go. But there are strong amateur leagues in New Zealand and in England. There are also 3 pros in Singapore, 1 in Europe, and 14 in the United States, of which 7 are in California. There are several strong Go clubs on the East Coast and 2 right here in Berkeley. Games played at the local clubs usually last about an hour and a half. But to convey some flavor of the game to those of you who may be unfamiliar with it, I'll now run through a sample game at lightning speed. The game is played on the intersections of a square board. Players alternate placing stones of their color onto the board. First black, then white, then black, etc. Each player is trying to claim territory and/or capture any opposing stones that invade it. Serious games use a 19 by 19 board, but beginners usually start by playing on smaller boards of size 13 by 13 or 9 by 9. When all of the nodes adjacent to a stone or a connected string of stones are occupied by stones of the opposite color, then that string is removed from the board and is said to be captured. The first capture in this particular game occurs on move number 34. This stone is now surrounded. It is captured and taken off the board. It is then black's turn. At this point, there is a sort of a race. White wants to capture this black group, but black wants to capture this white group. But black goes first and wins this capturing race. White gives up. He decides to abandon this fight and to play instead on top of the board. Eventually, black has to come down and get these stones off the board. He does that on move 49. These white stones are surrounded by black, so they are captured and taken off the board. The game then continues. After move 52, modern players would pass. White would claim the western side of the board, black would claim the east. Before discussing this game some more, I want to show you some more details of the capturing rule. At the top, if black were to play here, he captures nothing, so that move would be suicidal. It would not accomplish anything. When black plays here, he captures 2 white stones. Black stays on the board and the 2 white stones are removed. This is a situation where black can play here, capturing 1 white stone, but later white can play back here and capture the black stone. So we now locally have a 2-move loop, where the game could go back and forth, each capturing the other stone several times. This is called a ko. There is a special rule in Go which prohibits the immediate recapture of a ko. However, after playing anywhere else on the board, it then becomes legal to retake the ko. At different times and different places, there have been several slightly different rules for calculating the score. In medieval China, your score was very simply defined as the number of stones of your color on the board. So medieval Chinese players would not end their game here at move 52. They would continue playing into a phase of play I call the encore. During the encore, each player fills his own territory to get more stones onto the board. Let's speed ahead. After move 84, it's black's turn. Playing into any of his opponent's eyes would be suicidal, and playing into one of his own eyes would allow white to play into the other and capture all of black's stones on the board. After move 84, black passes, and after another play by white, both players pass, and the game ends. The medieval Chinese score of this game ignores the captives and counts only the stones on the board. Black won this game by 5 points, 41-36. Modern scoring rules eliminate the encore. Instead, good players using modern rules would both pass after move 52. Each player then receives points for both territory and for captives. This stone, which would be captured later if the encore were played out, is dead. It counts as 2 points, 1 point as a captive and 1 point for the territory beneath it. Black again won the game by 5 points, the same margin as in medieval Chinese rules. This is more than an accident. Although different variations of the scoring rules can sometimes yield different results, under common circumstances it can be shown that such differences are so small that they have no significant effect on the major strategic considerations of the game. There is now also a North American scoring system, which somewhat splits the minute differences between the traditional Chinese scoring and traditional Japanese scoring. A key feature of these North American rules is that they impose a 1-point cost on each pass move. In this particular game, the players were of nearly equal strength, and Black won largely because he got the first move. To compensate for this advantage, since the 1940s, it has been common for White to receive a bonus of some specified number of points called the komi. Throughout the second half of the 20th century, in Japan, the komi was specified to be 5.5 points. So here we have 5.5 extra points awarded to White. With that komi, White would have won this game by a half point. Here is a typical position taken from a popular Go book. Some pundit might say that he thinks the move at A is relatively small, but D is big, while C is even bigger. My initial attempts to quantify such statements led to considerable frustration. Great Go players don't want to engage in numerical discussions. They only want to play Go. So, in the mid-1990s, I devised a new variation of the game called Coupon Go. This game compels the players to make quantitative decisions. This particular game began with an empty Go board and a stack of 40 coupons. The values of the coupons are 20, then 19.5, then 19, and 18.5, all the way down. White also received an initial komi of 9.5, roughly half the value of the top coupon on the stack. At each turn, a player may choose either to take the top coupon, which is then added to his score, or, if he wishes, he may instead play on the board. So let's watch the opening of this game. Black goes first, and off they go, both players initially taking coupons. Black was Zhuzhou Jiang, the same player who led the Chinese to their 1985 victory over Japan. White was Naiwei Rui. She is the student of Go Sagan, who, in 2002, became the first woman to win a major international title match in open competition. Both players thought the first moves on the board were worth less than the 15-point coupon, but more than the 14.5-point coupon. But after these first three corner moves, Zhuzhou took the 14.5-point coupon rather than the fourth corner. This game, by the way, was played right here in Berkeley at the Mathematical Sciences Research Institute. Most professional games entail between 200 and 300 moves on the board, and this game was no exception. I'll now skip ahead from move 21 to the position after move 267. At this point, all coupons down through 1.5 have been taken. It turns out, analysis of positions such as this is simplified if, down here below the bottom of the board, we assume that instead of there being only coupons spaced 0.5 apart, the stack of coupons remaining down here were so thick that the difference between successive coupons is infinitesimally small. For example, in this picture, we see a stack of coupons spaced only 1/1000th of a point apart. Here is the position on the board at that time. I have marked the dead stones, which are destined to be captured, with 2 marks. A good Go player who studies this position for a while can see that it can be partitioned into several independent regions. Although some fighting remains in each of these regions, the game is far enough along that the fight in any one region does not have any direct impact on what's happening in the other regions. However, it can be fairly hard to figure out which regional fight is the most important. To illustrate this, I'd like to focus only on these two regions where the battles are of special interest. To illustrate this, I've flipped the colors in the northwest corner and then moved the two corner regions into a 13 by 13 board. This then becomes the basis of an illustrative problem which I contrived to illustrate some of the theory. Now it turns out that a thick stack of coupons enables us to give more precise meanings to several traditional Go terms, such as sente and gote. These have to do with whether or not you have to respond to your opponent's last move. In modern nomenclature, we start with a definition of local temperature. With a very thick stack of coupons, the local temperature is the value of a coupon at which a perfect player would be indifferent between taking the coupon or playing the move on the board. This is the same position on which we now show the local temperatures of the various moves. A red temperature is a move that's good for white. A blue temperature is a good move for black. A purple temperature is a good move for either player. We have a theorem which states that when there is an infinitely thick stack of coupons, if your opponent makes a move which locally raises the temperature, you should treat that as sente and respond locally. But if his move does not have sente, then you can play well by just playing the hottest temperature on the board. I'll show you how this works out. Of course, as you play, the temperature changes. Right now, the hottest temperature on the board is over here in the southwest corner. So black plays move number 1 here. That lowers the temperature. The next hottest move is then over here. So white plays move number 2 there. It raises the temperature. Once the temperature is raised with a sente move, it doesn't matter how high it's raised to. The best move is to respond, which is what black does. Then white plays move number 4 here. The local temperature has now gone down to 11/12 of a point. But elsewhere there are bigger moves with temperature 1, so they get played next. This one raises the temperature again, and the response brings the temperature back down. Soon the hottest point oscillates back and forth. This one went from 7/8 to 3/4. This one is now 5/6, but it goes down to 2/3, which makes the other one higher. The expert players are not responding locally. Black is busily playing in the southeast, while white is busily playing up there in the northwest. We're now down to temperature 1/3, and the game soon finishes up. There remain only a couple third-point moves and a couple zero-point moves. The main point of this example is that with the proper order of play, black gets several consecutive moves here in the southeast corner, whereas white, meanwhile, is getting several consecutive moves in the northwest corner. This problem, the only way you win it is to get the order exactly right, and the mathematics and these definitions allow you to do that. The local temperature provides a measure of how much the local score will vary among the different orthodox ways it might be played out. There could be several consecutive white plays, or perhaps first white, then black, or various other combinations. In some ways, temperature is similar to the standard deviation or variance in statistics, but in other ways, it's quite different. It's still true that each locality has a mean, which is the score you're going to get in this region averaged over all the orthodox orders in which it might be played out. In both statistics and in game theory, the mean of a sum is the sum of the means. However, in statistics, when you add up random variables, you find that the variance of the sum grows as the sum of the variances. However, in combinatorial games, this does not happen. The temperature of the sum is just the maximum of the temperatures. So we have no gain at all. I mean, the dispersion is constant no matter how many things you add up. In this sense, combinatorial games are much sharper than probability distributions. A situation which will baffle traditional players is when you have a move which is neither sente nor gote. Such a move does not change the temperature at all. Perhaps the local temperature is precisely 1. You make a move, and the temperature is still 1. It does not require the opponent to respond, nor does it decrease the local temperature. This requires a more complicated analysis, which traditional Go players don't fully understand. They want every move to either have sente or gote. They will go to great lengths to get right answers. They succeed in most cases, but their methodology is not able to distinguish between very close choices. So, to illustrate this, back in the early 1990s, David Wolf and I started composing problems which demonstrate why mathematics is more powerful for certain situations, such as this one. Here is a very hard problem, which was composed by David Wolf. No professional Go player who has worked on it, even for several hours, has ever managed to get it right. One 9-dan professional at the Nihon Keen in Tokyo spent 4 hours playing this position against me. He tried playing white. He failed. He tried again and failed again. So he concluded there was no solution. So we switched side. I played white and won. You see, he expected that the first move or two would resolve the problem. But no, it turns out this is sort of like walking on a tightrope, except that you don't know when you've fallen off. At every turn, the opponent has a whole myriad of moves he might make against you, and each of them requires a different global response. But there is a mathematical solution, and to give you a flavor of it, here it is. We partition the board into these various regions. The things not in these regions become irrelevant. Within each of these small regions, we find a so-called canonical form. Here they are. All these canonical values were found using only local computations. Each little region is a local problem that we can solve. We then have a methodology for adding them all up, from which we get the answer. If the answer is positive, then black can win no matter whose move is next. If the sum is negative, then white can win no matter whose move is next. If the sum is 0, which is unusual because these things rarely all cancel out like that, it turns out that the second player can win if we use the dialect of the rules in which it costs a point to pass. And there is this other possibility, which is actually fairly common. This is a symbol that means the sum is not greater than 0, nor equal to 0, nor less than 0. In those cases, the first player can win. Well, it's very common. Positions like this are called fuzzy. So in problems such as these, mathematical Go succeeds by cutting up the board into separate regions, then doing a careful and precise analysis of each region, and then combining the results of these analyses. This is an aggressive application of the reductionist Western scientific methodology. Traditional Go masters instead favor a holistic approach. They emphasize the need to evaluate each move in terms of its impact and influence over the entire board. They are extremely good at this art, especially with respect to the sorts of situations which occur most often in the early and middle stages of a game of Go. They are superbly adept at recognizing patterns and shapes and identifying a small set of moves which intuitively look good. They are then excellent at approximating which of these moves is the biggest. On the other hand, our mathematics is able to do some of these calculations precisely. It works very, very well near the end of a typical game, when the temperature is low. We have rigorously analyzed the last 100 moves of several composed problems, and more than the last 40 moves of several real games. Our biggest success so far is our analysis of this position, which occurred 60 moves before the end of a 1998 game which Jiang and Rui played at the North American Ing Center. The temperature of this position is just over 4. Partly with our help, in their official play of the last 60 moves, from here until the end of the game, we found 5 fatal mistakes. This was much to their surprise and our delight. That won them over as friends and collaborators, which they have been ever since. The same mathematics all based on the reductionist divide-and-conquer approach, has enjoyed even more success at hundreds of other combinatorial games. Philosophically, I view the issues of decomposition and modularity which we address in board games as special cases of central problems in many fields, ranging from computer architecture to organizational management. The reductionist bottom-up methodology and the holistic top-down approach each have important roles to play. We continue to seek a better understanding of the boundary between the two. Thank you.